Today on the Magic Kitchen podcast, we're talking about making your craft a priority. I'm Leandra Witchwood.
And I'm Elyse Wells.
And welcome to the Magic Kitchen podcast, where we talk about magic, kitchen witchcraft, herbs,
and everything in between. So before we get into this week's topic of making your magic a priority, we wanted to read a couple more reviews from some listeners. When you rate our podcast, you really are helping us be shown to more people and increase our reach. And we really appreciate that. And best of all, we like to hear what you really think about the podcast. So thank you for those of you who are leaving text reviews on Apple as well. So my review I'm going to read is from Crow Friend. And they have titled it Real Authenticity with 3 exclamation points. I have been binge listening to this podcast for a couple of weeks now, and I'm so glad I found this. Cuts through all the fake glam, quotation marks, gets down to the nuts and bolts of what it means to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. Love the work you are bringing forward, and I'm so here for it. Thank you. I love that. That's really flattering.
Thank you. That was awesome. Yeah. So my review comes from Lord Hellwrench, and he says, uplifting and informative without the pretense you'll find in so many other podcasts. I really appreciate that because I try to pride myself, and I know Elyse does too, on being real with people and not being dismissive or uppity about anything. So I really think our listeners appreciate that, and I'd love to see that it's expressed in that way. Thank you. So Elyse and I like to try and give you an update of what's happening in our daily lives, in our businesses, and what's going on. And there's been so much going on. I'm having a hard time figuring out where to start. So some of you know that I have closed my brick and mortar shop, and that is officially closed. I am in the process of clearing it out and getting all the furniture sold, that sort of thing. And I am back in my home office space that I had renovated before I went into the brick and mortar place. And it feels so good. I can't tell you how good it feels to be in this energy of home, of like Elyse says, genus loci, where we have communed with the spirits locally. And I work with them directly every single day. I finally have, my altar set up, my cabinet set up, everything is ready to go. And and if you follow me on social media, you'll see, what I have, my setup in my videos and that sort of thing. And it's so inspiring and so comforting to be back in this space. So that's really the big thing that's going on with me right now. And just continuing the tea business and, getting my blends out there for all you witchy folks to enjoy. And I hope you enjoy a nice hot cup of tea or cold. Hey, if you like cold tea with the episode this time around.
And for me, I am full swing in my writing right now. So I write for 5 different magazines monthly. So I write for the Wild Hunt News. I write for Which Way magazine. I write for Full Moon magazine. And I write for Metaphysical Times. And then usually I write 2 articles for the Wild Hunt. So I share those on my social media, but I also share the paid articles for all of my Patreon subscribers. So if you'd like to read those articles, they vary from coverage of festivals that are pagan in origin. I just did an article that'll be out by the time you listen to this on Apokrios, which is a Greek Easter celebration before Easter. And the church does not officially sanction it, because it is a rite to Dionysius that has just not been able to be squashed out. So things like that are usually what I'm covering. And I also cover, of course, how-tos. I have an awesome article on spell work and how to personalize it and why you should, coming out on Patreon later this month. So I'm writing a lot, which is awesome. I'm also working with my editor on Witch on the Juniata River, which I'm really happy to say is coming along. I'm so honored when people read snippets of it. And later this month, I'm sharing a little bit on Patreon, which patrons, this is the first you're hearing of that, but I decided that yesterday when I was looking at it. I finally feel ready to share it a little bit. So baby steps, but I think it's going to be a really nice book for people who are struggling with coming out of the broom closet and also not sure what to do with that and not sure how to talk about it with non-magical people. And also if you have ghosts, because Kendra's got ghosts. So yeah, lots of writing. And then on the spiritual travel side, I've been given some tours in the winter, which I don't usually get to do, but it's been nice. I just happen to have a few folks in the area in Greece to join me on a Seeking Numina tour. And I myself will be seeking Numina, spiritual places, later this month. Actually in March, I'll be going to Ireland for about a week. And then at the end of the month, I'm going to Prague. And then I also just booked for Malta in April. I've never been to Malta. So if you have any recommendations for any of the above places, please let me know. I will be sharing it prolifically, I'm sure, on my Instagram stories, as I tend to do. Have you ever wondered where the practices of modern witchcraft really come from? In my next workshop, A History of Modern Witchcraft, I'll delve deep into our origins, from the 1880s through the 20th century to today. Join me on Zoom March 11th at noon EST, and get the recording to watch at your convenience. Tickets are available at seekingnumina.com/events, and early birds get 35% off through February 28th. I hope to see you there. So now that we're all caught up and you know what we're up to, let's get into our topic of this episode, which is making your craft a priority. One of the biggest issues that witches encounter is once you're past the aesthetic interest or the magical pull of, wow, witchcraft is something I can actually do, sometimes it can be hard to prioritize your spiritual path. Yeah. And it starts to feel a little bit like work even sometimes because it is. Witchcraft is an active path, and it can be hard to actually overcome that hurdle of prioritizing your path. So we wanted to talk a bit about how we got to the place we are where it is a daily practice and how you can get there too. Yeah, and it's actually easier than I think most people believe it to be or make it out in their head to be, because it's really just the little things every day. It's not these big grand gestures, is these little things. And we've talked about that before, that it's the little things you do incrementally through the day or through the week, through the month even, that create this solid foundation for yourself where you can, sink into the idea of magic being in the mundane or the mundane being magic. And this is funny because it's so, I don't know, it's serendipitous that we are talking about this now, because Stacy and I were just talking about this with Erin about how she feels like there's this disconnect because she's going back to school, she's going back to work, she's doing all these mundane things, so she feels disconnected. But yet she's having all of these vivid dreams that are connecting her back to her magical roots and her path. And that's really where I think we kind of dismiss things, thinking that magic has to be this, magical fire and, lightning in the air in order for it to be this, flow of magic, when really it's just about, oh, hey, I had this crazy dream. Let me sit and think about this for a little bit. And what are the messages? Because you're being spoken to, you're being communicated to by spirit. It's just not, oh, hey, call you on the telephone type speaking. Yeah. I think there can be unrealistic expectations of put on you. I think we do that to ourselves, where we put on ourselves an unrealistic expectation of what our magical life is going to look like. Now that we're witches, everything's changing. That's how we feel once we commit to this path. And I also think we put an unrealistic expectation on the magic itself. Magic is not a quick fix-all solution to any problem. Even when you have a really well-planned spell, even when you know that you're doing it right. Even when you're confident in that ritual space and you're confident in the time afterwards when, as the magic's working, because of course we know, like, we do a spell, it's not going to actually happen that second. It still might not really work the way you think it is, or it might not feel at all like it's working. And that can be hard to stomach, to stay with. And I think that's part of it, is remove that expectation of like quick fix or
right.
Absolutely. Quick absolving of any issues.
I agree with that, because I think we forget in our modern era, and I don't know where we went with this, how we veered off of this time spent or cyclical idea of magic. Maybe it was Hollywood thinking that we could open a book, say a few words, and bam, there's the spell. It's all,
Yeah.
lightning and, glitter dust and everything. And there it is. You have your result. In ancient times, with our ancestors, magic took time. It was cyclical. It was not one spell and done. Very few spells were one and done. We're seeing that more now because we're so impatient with things. But our ancestors were in love with the time spent. They were in the present moment with it. So they spent every day working their magic, whether that meant they spent a week sewing a puppet or creating a sigil or, a whole moon cycle from, waxing to waning, full to dark, to do a particular style of magic where it took time. They were present with it every day. Maybe not every minute of every day, but they were like, oh, I'm going to get up early in the morning, and before everyone else is in the house, I'm going to stir this pot of elixir or something that I have been brewing for 2 days now. It was very purpose-driven and present moment-driven. And it wasn't just, oh, here, I'm going to wave my finger and, spit in a cauldron and ta-da, done.
Yeah. And it didn't always look like we think witchcraft has to look. Again, it's I guess probably coming from Hollywood and coming from these Instagram reels. I know we've talked about it before. Like, there's a lot of aesthetic witchcraft that is actually, I think it's fine, like, when we know it's aesthetic, but where it can be dangerous is where we see aesthetic and they tell us that that's necessary, that there's some part of it that's necessary to just look that nice. Like, your altar space is not going to, look the same as what you see online. And you aren't going to necessarily even go into the ritual. Once you're in the ritual, perform it the way you thought you were before you entered that ritual. Like, you can't really plan your spiritual path. Like, there's no spell that's going to go exactly as you planned. Like, I did it recently.
Downloads.
Yeah, you're going to get messages that you might not really want to hear. That's so true. but that's why we're doing it. Like, I'm a firm believer that there is really just two components to a spiritual life. 90% of living a magical life, having a daily magical practice, is acknowledgement and observance. That's it. That's 90% of it. It's being open, it's observing, listening, and acknowledging when something is thrown in your path. The other 10% is taking that and using it, ruminating on it, working with it, writing it down, not ignoring it, essentially. I think that's it. I really think it's 90% acknowledgement. And that is probably hard to stomach when you're coming from, like, if you're new to the craft or you're new to actually deciding to prioritize it, you might be waiting for these big, bold changes, these crazy new feelings. Like, it's kind of like when you're a kid and it's your birthday and they say, do you feel older? And you're like, no. Like, it's kind of like that. Like, do you feel witchier? No, I just am.
No. I'm me.
Yeah, I'm still me. I just have a new label for now, And and that's it too. Like, don't box yourself in on your path. Just start listening. And you'll decide really where that's taking you next. And I guarantee it's not going to always be where you planned.
No. And let's go back to those aesthetics you mentioned. So when I create habits for myself, and my witchcraft is a habit, it's something that I created for myself. One of the things that does help is aesthetics. So making it appealing so I want to engage with it is good. So having that altar where you look at it, you go, oh my God, that statue is so cool. I love that statue. It makes you want to engage with it. Or, oh, I got a new candle and I can't wait to burn it. That sort of thing. Like you have creating those habits, you do have to have things on your altar or in your sight that draw you into it.
Yeah.
So if it's, whether it's like a little box that you keep your altar in, make it a beautiful box. Make it something that you look at and go, oh, I can't wait to do that, or I can't wait to touch that. And that's really engaging that child archetype in our craft, where we have that sense of wonder, or we have that sense of, intrigue, where we want to put our hands on it and we want to do stuff with it.
And I think that, yeah, that's true. I think of that as like ritualizing your life. Like for me, ritual is a much sexier word than routine. Routine is that thing that your teacher growing up forced you to do this at this time. And then they ring the bell and you go to the next cycle and you're like, but I was still painting. Like it's annoying. Routine is frustrating. But ritual, that's where you're romanticizing your life. That's where you wake up and you look at that beautiful altar and you pick out the incense you're going to burn and you smell it and you're like, oh, and then you light it and you watch the smoke waft up towards you. Like you take it that slow and you appreciate that. And it doesn't mean that you need to have an elaborate morning ritual, but like that is one thing that helps me start my day on the right foot. Like when I just sit at my altar, stand at my altar and spend time there and just decide what I'm going to do, that usually means incense because I'm a big like aroma person. But that's something that makes me feel more grounded, and it is a routine, but I don't think of it as a routine, and it is aesthetic, but I don't do it simply because it's aesthetic, if that makes sense. I think it's about approach. So ritualizing your life, ritualizing your routines, if that word doesn't piss you off like it does for me, then that's something you could do. So look for other ways you could ritualize your life. It can be as simple as looking at the activities you already do. You make a cup of coffee in the morning. Think about stirring that coffee clockwise to invoke what you need to for that day. Do you want to banish something? Maybe yesterday you had a really bad conversation with somebody at work, or somebody, getting on your nerves for some reason. Banish interactions with that person, or banish negative interactions with that person by stirring anti-clockwise. Look at opportunities for using deep breathing. Practice them when you're calm. And then when you have a stressful situation or a boring situation, you can do some deep breathing exercises. I have some on my YouTube channel that you can check out.
There you go.
Put some sigils in your workplace, Look for places you're already doing the things. You're already there. Ritualize it. Make it witchier.
Make it witchier. Well, going back to the coffee idea, if you enjoy using herbs and that sort of thing, put cinnamon in your coffee. And okay, so let me go back to coffee, because artificial flavors and stuff like that, that's not going to do it for you. You need the actual herb. You need the actual energetic properties of that herb or spice. So, if you can fresh ground your cinnamon, do that. Otherwise, just use your cinnamon in your cupboard. You can bless it before you sprinkle it in. But cinnamon is great for power, success, activation. It's also a great anti-inflammatory. So it might help, counteract some of that cream and sugar you're putting in there. But, think of like other ways, not just stirring, but think of other ways you can incorporate magic into the things you do. When you're kitchen witchery, when you're making your breakfast in the morning, you're doing that with intention. You're choosing your ingredients with intention. You're choosing yogurt and almonds in your yogurt for business success or to get that new job, that sort of thing.
I think that's a good word for what a magical life is. It's an intentional life. Like you don't really do anything without having thought about the result of that choice. Like from what we put in our bodies to how we spend our time to how we spend our energy. I say that all the time. You're probably tired of hearing of it, but time and energy, that's it. That's the only resources. So use them intentionally. Don't waste your time with somebody who isn't enriching or nourishing you, who's going to drain you and, leave you like a husk at the end of the conversation. Like shake that off. And that can be where witchcraft helps, because you can kind of set your day up, do your shielding at home for those
Yes.
kinds of interactions that you're trying to avoid. You're trying to live intentionally. You're setting out every day, reminding yourself to live intentionally.
Well, and going to touching on that energy mindset, knowing our cycles, our energetic cycles, menstrual cycle, our cycle connected to the moon and astrology, our birth chart and that sort of thing. The idea here is what works for you may not work for everyone else. What works for everyone else might not work for you. A great example were the past couple of cycles that it came around, like the Aries full moon that was not so long ago. That one hit me wonderfully. I had so much energy. I had so much power. I had so much oomph behind it. So every magical intention that I executed during that full moon was spot on and almost instant in its result. Then came into the Scorpio moon, not so much. That was not my energy. So when you see like these people on social media saying, oh, this moon is for this and you should be doing blah, 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 blah. They're listing out all these things that you should be focusing on. That might not resonate with you. It might not work for you because in your birth chart, in your alignment with that energy, it is not happening. So that's your cue to like take that step back and say, you know what? I don't have to do anything. You don't have to be on all the time. And I think there's still that pressure, that hustle mindset in witchcraft, especially in the younger generations, that you always have to be on. You always have to be doing. That's not self-care. That's not walking your path authentically. That's walking it according to someone else's interpretation of the current energy, whether it be the lunar cycle, astrological events, whatever. So knowing your cycles, knowing how the moon influences you, knowing how your menstrual cycle influences you and what part you are, what stage you are in within your menstrual cycle, and connecting it to the moon, connecting it to your birth chart, connecting it to the energies around you. Maybe you're always tired and you can't figure out why you're always tired. So you change your diet and you realize, oh, now I have more energy. Okay, so I can connect more fully. So there's these little incremental changes that we make in our daily patterns that lead up to this big cyclical overview of our patterns and how we interact with everything. If you can see me, I wish you could see me right now because I'm like moving my hands like a big old circle. It looks funny. But not everyone is the same. And that's the point of leading your path authentically according to your patterns, your cycles, your energetic levels. If you feel low in energy, rest. That's your cue. Rest, take a break. Evaluate why you might feel low energy. Maybe you're sick. There's all kinds of viruses going on right now. And if you're sick, it's your body is telling you, take a break, sis, take a break.
Yeah. And I think too, like when we are, so we're always being affected by the energy around us. So we have the astrological energy, but we also have like the consciousness of society. We have the zeitgeist of what's in, what's out, what's good, what's bad, who's canceled today. Like there's a lot that you are absorbing even when you don't realize it. So right. I think part of this, like 90% of witchcraft is noticing. It's not just about the world you inhabit, but you in that world and how that's affecting you. Mm-hmm. So it could be diet. It could also be like your brain's diet. Like what are you consuming? Look at the way you're using your phone, the internet in general, which apps you spend the most time on. See if you need to put app timers on. I recommend getting a cat because they will eventually poke you and be like, come pet me. And that'll get you out of the doom scroll. Like there's a lot of things that we get sucked into because that's what phones were designed to do, sucks in. And so naturally they're doing a great job at it. So that can really, really tear us down depending on what's going on in the world. And it's always something bad, right? Like there's never going to be, the good news doesn't get likes. So it's going to be controversy and
all that clickbait.
Yeah. So, and even though it's, you can try to curate your feed, like the algorithms aren't designed to show you what you enjoy. They're designed to keep you moving on it. So keep that in mind. Like these apps are not our friends. That's why both of us run
Yeah.
our communities on platforms that are not on social media. Like Instagram
Yep,
has this
absolutely.
subscribe option, but I don't want people to have to stick around on Instagram. Like, come to Patreon. No. It is quiet. It is calm. It is only what you're there for. You're not going to randomly get content that isn't of interest, and it's not going to keep you, locked into a rabbit hole.
It's relevant. Yes.
That you're not interested
Same with
in.
the Rebel Mystic community. Yeah. It's relevant to what we're talking about. And the pantry, especially, where Elyse and I both show up, and it's like the bonus episodes of the podcast where you can interact with us directly.
Yeah, twice a month we're doing workshops for the pantry community.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun. And, we get to know each other personally. And you don't get that on social media. You don't get to know the people who are talking at you through podcasts or even through social media. You don't get to really directly interact with them. Like, maybe they'll answer your question, but then they move on because there's so much distraction there. And witchcraft really, it not only is it 90%, paying attention and noticing, it's also your mindset. So you have to notice your mindset. So if you're scrolling through your feed and you're like, oh, that girl, or oh, that creator, or oh, I wish I had that. Like, if you're constantly finding that your mindset is in a state of lack, that's not leading you to manifest what you need to in your life. That's leading you to manifest more lack, more frustration, more envy, more jealousy. Mm-hmm. And that's not where we want to go with our path. We want to anchor ourselves in nourishment. We want to anchor ourselves in manifesting the things that are the right thing for us, that are the right action, the right mindset, the right leadership, the right people around us. What do they say, that you are the sum of the seven people that you 5 or 7,
I always hear
something
5,
like that?
But yeah.
Okay, I've heard 7, I've heard 10. So I guess it depends on who you're talking to.
Who knows 10 people?
Well, I mean, they were saying that it's also podcasts you listen to, influencers you follow, and that makes sense because what you're surrounding yourself with is going to help mold your mindset and your outlook and your outcome of what you're doing in life. So if you're surrounding yourself with gloom and doom, guess what? That's probably what you're going to be focused on, right?
Are you enjoying the show? If you are, we'd really appreciate a 5-star review. It helps us to reach more listeners like you and to keep doing the Magic Kitchen podcast. Thank you.
So in this podcast, I want to help give you guys some actionable things you can take away from what we're talking about. And this is setting priorities. So we all get the same 24 hours in a day, right? And we all have to decide, what is important to us in those priorities. So that's the definition of a priority. What's important, right? So if your craft is important to you, then you are going to make time for it. You're going to find 2 minutes here, 5 minutes there. And for me, that's how I start a habit. I spend 2 minutes doing it. And then usually what I find is once I'm in that habit, if I'm in it, doing it for 2 minutes, then I'm going to stick around for like 5, 10, 15 minutes because I'm already doing it, right? I'm already in the mindset. So let's go. And I think that's where setting priorities really becomes that golden nugget of getting yourself to a point of making your witchcraft a way of life and making it a priority. Is you just do something for 2 minutes, a minute, 30 seconds, whatever it takes to get your brain to trigger and say, okay, we're doing this now, so let's do it, right?
Mm-hmm. A technique you can use to start a new habit for your practice is incorporating a cycle ritual into this next upcoming full moon. So that's one recommendation. You can go from full moon to, well, actually, no. I would go from new moon to full moon and invoke something that you want to see grow. So a new moon, new beginning, something new that you're interested in. Maybe it could be an intention to meditate every day, or maybe it is a mindset shift to not see yourself as the victim in situations, or it's a shift to love yourself, or some mantra or affirmation that you can write, that's going to be the base of this. And you start on the new moon, maybe with a bit of a longer ritual. In my Patreon community, I shared a cycle ritual for entering winter, the new moon into the long night's moon in December. So if you join that community, you can get access to that cycle moon, which is cycle ritual, which is relevant for any moon. And you basically start with your affirmation, give an offering to deity, great spirit, a goddess or god you work with in particular. And then you move every day doing something intentional. So I would recommend blessing a candle that you are going to light each night. And then at the end, at that full moon, you could burn down the whole rest of the candle. Or you could light an incense each night that matches that affirmation. You might do jasmine for self-love. You might do myrrh or frankincense for wealth. And then as you're moving through this cycle, you start to every night or morning, whichever works better for you, light this incense, ground and center with this affirmation, and set this intention for yourself. It doesn't have to take a long time. It could be 2 minutes. It could be 30 seconds. It could be 10 minutes. Maybe you start meditating afterwards. Like Leandra said, once you're there, you might feel like sticking around. And then once you get to the full moon, you've done this at that point for, what is it, like 18 days, 27 days, something like that. So you now have, a bit of a habit that you could continue if you liked that. And you can switch it up. You don't have to stick with the same affirmation. You could change your incense. You could change to a candle if you were using incense before. You could add a meditation. You could start doing a little sound healing. If you have a Tibetan singing bowl or a happy drum like I do. I love my happy drum. Like, do something fun. Like, just show up at your altar at that time now that you've been doing it for a month. You may as well keep going.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if that seems like a lot of time for you, maybe your cycle ritual is 3 days. Maybe it's
do it through the dark moon, weeks. Like the night before, night of, night after.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to. And like I said before, magic traditionally spells were not one and done, quick, snap your fingers. I'm doing this one spell and then all of a sudden all my dreams come true. Mm-hmm. They took a long time. Even connecting with spirits and deities, some rituals took years. And that was the dedication our ancestors had. And we've lost that. We've lost that thriving love to be in the moment and experience the moment because we're always like, oh, I've got to move on to the next thing. What's the next thing? What's the next thing?
Yeah.
And that is something that will kill your magic instantly if you're constantly thinking of what's the next thing, or if you're constantly,
dividing your
harping
focus.
on, dividing your focus or harping on what you could have done differently or could have done better instead of just allowing the energy to flow. And our mindset is a huge either siphon or a funnel. It can be either really, really great in allowing the energy to flow, or it can stifle it and stop it in its tracks. So getting yourself to a point where you're just in the moment, be present. Don't worry about what Susie's doing over here. Don't worry about what Joe's doing over there. Don't worry about your to-do list. In that moment, in that 5-10 minutes that you're taking for that ritual, that's all that matters is that ritual and connecting with the purpose of that ritual.
And don't worry so much about how deity feels about what you're doing. That was an early stressor and something that comes up a lot with different community members. Like, do I look silly? Is this the incense that they like? That's just not how deity thinks. They're immortal beings. They don't care if your hair is a mess or if you
really don't.
Aren't wearing their favorite color or like, I mean, I've seen people be like very afraid of this. Like, please do not be afraid of offending deity. Like, it's just not going to happen. It's going to happen if you really work hard to do it, or if you neglect something that you promised that you were going to do, once they've delivered this magical working that you asked for. If you said you were going to offer them pomegranate seeds, like, you better not forget to do that, because that's just not something that you would do to a friend. You just don't do that.
Yes.
So, but don't be afraid don't get in your head about deity's judgment of you. They just don't do that.
The judgments that we feel are our own and our societal judgments. That's what's there.
That's human stuff. That's not.
It is. It's all a human construct. And I know we laugh, and it's serious, though. It's very serious because it's deeply ingrained in us. We think that, oh, if we, dance around the living room a little bit, then we're being goofy and silly, and it's somehow bad to do that. I don't understand where this concept of feeling your body and feeling the energy of a ritual or spirit became this bad thing. And it's time in our craft to be authentic. So if you feel like dance a jig, dance a jig. If you feel like singing, even though you can't carry a tune, so what? So freaking what? Just do it. The Magic Kitchen podcast is funded and supported by thewitchwoodteahouse.com, offering a variety of hand-blended loose leaf teas as well as loose herbs for all of your ritual, spell work, wellness, and everyday enjoyment needs. If you would like to support this podcast while sipping a great cup of tea, head over to thewitchwoodteahouse.com and find the magic that's in store for you.
So the last thing that is a great part of prioritizing your magical path is to shield every day. And we don't want to sound like a broken record, so I'd rather just direct you to our season 2 finale, where we talk about shielding your energy. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you get a free downloadable guide to shielding your energy. And if you are interested in joining the Magic Kitchen Pantry, my course, Magical Living Every Day, also has a lot of information on shielding and mindset shifts and this whole episode topic. So you get my course when you join the pantry, and you get us at 2 workshops every month, which is really fun. So we'd love to see you join us there.
You also get the Witchcraft for Beginners, which I also talk about protection magic and execration magic in there. So you get a lot of good resources with us.
Yeah. And I think, we want to see you in our communities because we like knowing who our listeners are, but it's really for you guys. Like, I promise you, the hardest thing about being a witch is the isolation that it can kind of lead us into. And when you reach out and you have some community, like a lot becomes more clear, like things that you might have felt confusion on. And like, I know a lot of witches who came back to the path after years away because they hit a roadblock, a confusion, and they were too embarrassed to ask. So they just stopped practicing, and that breaks my heart. So if you are in that place of like overwhelm with your craft, please just join us in the community. Like, all it takes sometimes is reading a post and seeing some comments from like-minded folks. You might not even want to comment at first. You just see them, and that might stimulate you to get out there and light some incense or something. So just come on over. We have the free space, the broom closet. You can join us there and get to know some other listeners. And I really love how all of our listeners seem to all be really cool. Like, I feel like there's been a lot of friendships made in our communities with each other. Like, it's been really fun. So just join us over there and see if that helps. Because community, and go to your local events. Like, I think there's a real understatement that like community is a big part of witchcraft. Like, it's covens, but it's not just all or coven. Like, people are like, oh, join a coven. Like, you don't have to join a coven, but you don't have to go to a public event. You can join a group like ours, and it's not Facebook groupy. Like, we don't like tell you what to do. And we don't get those weird commenters who are like, oh, it's an omen, you're dying. Like, it's not going to happen. It's a lot more open than that.
Those are great, right? Yeah. Oh my God, you're going to die because you saw a dead bird. No, come on, guys.
Oh, I know. Or they'll be like, yeah, Apollo is definitely mad at you. I would move. I mean, I've seen comments like that in Facebook groups. Like, we don't get there. We don't go there in our groups. It's a lot more uplifting.
Yeah, I'm so done with the whole public groups. I don't even get on my Facebook half the time because I'm so done with it. And, I think it's a toxic mindset that our communities instill in us, that we have to, first of all, that we have to be on all the time. We have to hustle, 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 which creates that overwhelm.
Yeah.
Or that we are, that every omen we get is something negative.
Sometimes the sign isn't even for now.
No.
Like, I vividly remember about maybe 4 months before I realized I was going to be moving to Greece, before I even asked deity, like, what I need to do next, because I knew something big had to change. And it was in the fall, and I had that message in, like, around the equinox in the spring. So I know it was, like, months before. I got a gray a gray feather. Like I ran into a gray feather, which never happens. I lived in Baltimore, and it wasn't a pigeon feather. Even weirder.
No.
And, gray means transitionary period when you see a gray feather. So I was like, oh, that's weird. Nothing weird in my life right now. Like, I guess, maybe it's for someone else. I actually just totally wrote it off, but I took a picture of it and kept the feather and whatever. And later I realized like, oh, that's what this message was. Like sometimes it's a delayed understanding, like tarot readings or any divination form. We can kind of have like a message we don't know we're supposed to receive and not always even know why or when it's going to happen.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean you have to freak out about it. It doesn't mean you have to, take everything as this imminent threat or imminent message. Sometimes it's just kind of like, hey, something's coming up. It's sliding under, under the radar a little bit, but it's just coming. So just keep your eyes open.
When it comes to making your craft a priority, the best advice, if you take only one thing from this episode, is to just keep open, keep listening, and start getting ready to make intentional changes. Start small.
Merry meet,
merry part, and merry meet again.
Thank you for joining us on the Magic Kitchen podcast. Please visit my website, leandrawitchwood.com, for news, information, and more episodes.
I'm Elyse Wells, and I can be found at Seeking Numina on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and seekingnumina.com. That's Seeking, Numina.